Hi, I'm Lex Hall, Content Editor with Morningstar Australia. I thought today I'd catch up with the Director of Equity Research, Johannes Faul, to talk about the plunge in markets, what it means, what the outlook holds, and also to look at some stocks that are in buying territory. Johannes, thanks for your time today.
Thanks for having me, Lex.
Now, someone yesterday, I think, said this is the correction we had to have. Markets have plunged to levels not seen since 1987. Is this the correction we had to have, do you think? Do you agree?
Oh, as in the decline, we haven't seen sharp declines like that since 1987. I think the market's still a bit higher, thankfully. But look, you know, that point on the correction, if we look back a couple of months, you know, at Morningstar we were saying the market's overvalued on average. So if you took our average coverage in Australia and weighted that by the market cap, we were saying, hey, the market's 20% overvalued. Yeah. There's a lot of downside risk here. You know, the one takeaway though is that in our view, the sell is overdone, and we see a lot of opportunities emerging actually for investors in the Australian market to you know take an opportunity here and you know buy some shares. Yeah,
well, as we said today, I think stock list here are about 50 stocks or so that are 5-star currently. So there are buying opportunities out there. We'll talk about that in a sec. What do you think the short-term outlook is for Australia and the long-term? What's the short-term?
Yeah, look, I mean, Morningstar's healthcare strategist out of the US, Karen Anderson, came out with a very interesting piece. And what she's done a very deep dive analysis on how have previous pandemics played out. And based on those figures, plus the outlook that we'll have a treatment most likely by the end of this year, maybe even autumn, the Northern Hemisphere autumn coming up. So, you know, this will be a short-term issue, the health issue. Also, there's other repercussions, secondary knock-on effects, and people are perhaps rightly so worried about, you know, the financial system. But what we've seen from the central banks and politicians globally is a lot of monetary easing and a lot of fiscal stimulus already coming through, and they've acted very quickly, which really abates that risk. So when we think about the global impact, it's going to be material. It has already been material. You know, the Chinese numbers came out overnight and how far their economy slowed, and we've talked about that and what that means for Australia. But you know, the short-term impact is going to be material, but long-term, we think this is going to go away. And actually, with all this stimulus, with all this easing happening, we think the bounce back will be quite strong.
Okay. Yeah, after SARS, for example, it took about 6 months and then we saw a rebound. So hopefully we'll see something like that. And as you say, we're already seeing this morning, Tuesday morning, we're seeing a slight bump. BHP's up 8%, for example.
Yes.
You were saying that is linked to China and
Perhaps. And look, markets are still very volatile. And you know, it reminds me of you know, a decade ago when large indices, you know, like the S&P 500, were whipping around quite a bit. We're talking 5% moves overnight, up or down, and it just, all this volatility to me suggests a lot of people are in the dark a bit. Like, what does this mean? How severe is going to be the impact? We looked at a few studies from the mid-noughties, which, you know, gave different ranges of short-term GDP growth impacts of pandemics. And they range obviously between, you know, very low single digits up to 10%. In our mind, in our weighted case, we think that GDP growth this year will be slammed by 2 percentage points. To put that in perspective, the IMF thought early this year in January, GDP growth will be 3.3%. So we're taking a bit sliver off that. We're not thinking there's going to be a global recession at this stage.
Okay, let's turn to buying opportunities and stock picking. Like I said, we've got a list here of 50 stocks that are in 5-star territory. Are they all buys? And you were mentioning earlier that it's very important to take into account companies' balance sheet. Like consumers, like retail investors, they have debts and bills that they've got to pay, and that's the big problem for small businesses in the short term. Some of them won't survive. Tell us about evaluating 5-star stocks and looking at the balance sheet.
Yeah, so I think that that's a very valid question what you say, and I think it really needs to be looked at on a case by case study, or just by case by case, in terms of how do these companies' balance sheets actually look? Are they strong enough to withstand 3 months of this, 6 months of this, 12 months of this? We obviously don't know how long is our economy going to slow for. But look, we're seeing China coming back. They're returning to work. The workers are returning to the offices. The workers are returning to the factories, and it's been a couple of months. It'll take some time to revamp everything. Yeah. But if you think about the capabilities, the capacity of the economy itself, that hasn't been touched by the coronavirus. It hasn't destroyed any machineries or such in that sense. So
people have just stopped. Activities just stopped.
Exactly. We just ground to a halt, and it's been an abrupt one too. Again, some sectors, some industries are hit harder than others, and we can talk about supermarkets versus airlines, for instance, right? But we think that it'll be short term. That demand will bounce back. And again, circling back to our house view is, yes, a severe near-term impact on GDP, but longer term, we think it's going to be a strong bounce with above trend GDP growth, over 3 years as it would bounce. And then long term, in terms of total global output, we think we're only going to be a bit sliver lower in 2024 than we would have been without Corona, only by 0.3%.
All right. So, Johannes, overall, you see a vaccine. Our research suggests a vaccine within a year and a half, perhaps, and world GDP to recover.
Yes, absolutely. So our research suggests there could be a treatment out earlier. So by the end of 2020, there could be a vaccine by mid to late 2021. That's our view. And hence, once Corona's gone and we can manage it, we think the economy is going to bounce back and bounce back strongly. So again, it's just a short-term impact in our view.
All right. Well, you're in the middle of preparing a report which should be out later this week, and we look forward to reading that. So thanks for your insights.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lex.
I'm Lex Hall from Morningstar. Thanks for watching.
Any advice in this video is general advice prepared by Morningstar without reference to your financial objectives, situation, or needs. You should consider the advice in light of these matters and any relevant product disclosure statement before making any decision to invest.